designed by the architect to look like the monolith from the movie 2001. So you have the monolith present at a huge 2001 event from a movie that was supposed to take place in 2001, and this monolith was meant to represent a sort of stargate, an opening into cosmic consciousness. So, I'm hesitant to say what he still thinks about one aspect of it. Again, I don't want to put words in someone's mouth, but he started this as an idea that it seemed very ritualistic, something conspiratorial, something that was obviously planned to perhaps shift people's lines of thinking. And then as he explored it more and more and more, he came to a conclusion that it was the universe itself conspiring to sort of wake people up. He told me a few weeks ago that he actually thinks 9/11, a common thing we've all noticed is that 9/11 here in New York is the phone number for emergency services. So there's a common idea that whoever planned 9/11, whatever human conspiracy forces planned it, were trying to trigger in people's mind this idea of, emergency, be afraid. And I don't know if I necessarily agree with this, but Jake told me the other day, he actually thinks that the 9/11 event was so important that in a non-linear, almost reverse ripple through time, that the phone number 911 is actually was created as because of the 9/11 event. I don't know if that makes sense. If I'm explaining.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
Rather than 9/11 being designed for the phone number, he actually thinks that the phone number was designed by the universe as a sort of portent of this event. This event was so significant that it sort of had ripples through time. I can't confirm or deny that, but I think that's fascinating. But he had done a big study of it, and if you look on YouTube under the name Seallion, Seallion, you'll find Jake's videos, and they're still on YouTube. And his early videos were about this 9/11 Stargate concept, and I think for him, it just started to get weirder and weirder and weirder and weirder. And like I was saying earlier, it becomes something that goes beyond human conspiracy. And I know he's still saying it's not that there aren't human conspirators involved. It's just that they themselves are pawns in some grander scheme.
That's right. They become the vessels. They become tools, if you will, for a higher purpose in one sense, right?
Correct, yes. And I want to sort of stick on this 9/11 Stargate subject for a minute, but I just want to quickly give you a quick little story, which is, in my piece in the Sync book, what I decided to do was approach this idea. Since I had been writing fiction for a number of years, before I got into any of these subjects, I felt that was a sort of unique opportunity for me, since no one else I really thought was... they're all addressing, saying what commonalities we might find with 2001: A Space Odyssey. Well, they're not Stanley Kubrick, so they can't speak for him as to what was intentional, what wasn't. So while there's this debate between, it's just all magic, or this debate between it's all predictive programming, I gave a few examples in the book of things that I had written when I was younger, which directly paralleled 9/11 and different world events, which certainly I'm not an Illuminati member. I'm certainly not trying to program humanity into accepting anything, unless I'm a vessel for something as well, obviously. So I guess the reason I sort of dropped that in here is the lesson that it taught me is their propaganda is real. Of course, propaganda is a very real thing. Predictive programming might even be a very real tool used by these guys. But if every artist puts their story out there, and the universe, or whatever muse or whatever way ideas come to us, if there's all this other unintentional but incredibly powerful parallels to other events, that's the real magic. So my point, and the reason I want to drop this in here is because if we're going to talk about 9/11, it's a very controversial topic. I think it's important to state, even if someone is writing a script of pure propaganda, something to invade Iraq for oil or to start a new world order or any number of scenarios we can decide 9/11 was scripted for, it's important for me to put out there that even someone writing a propaganda script would be subject to the same phenomenon as a fiction writer writing a story and noticing a few years later, oh my God, I accidentally, dropped in some knowledge that there was no way for me to know about some future event. Yeah. So to me, even a propaganda script writer is still going to have this unintentional synchronicity seep into their work.
They're extracting material from a pool of I don't know, mass consciousness, collective unconscious, whatever, what have you in that sense. And this line of work is obviously things that various agencies have been doing, work with in order to actually try to predict future. There's a number of these. Obviously people are probably familiar with the WebBot project of Cliff High. That's kind of one version of that. Then you have CIA was funding this Swedish company actually recently. They did 10 interesting companies that start up, and one of these was in the same veneer, to try to predict the future. But because the question here is, if we're all tapping into something, if we're tapping into a pool of this collective consciousness, then this information is going to be there in one sense or another. So that means that they're not separate. They're not detached from this. Whether even if you're just a fiction writer, as you say, or if you're a propagandist, we're all part of it. We're in this sludge, if you will, to begin with, and so we can't put ourselves outside of that. So we are going to, in one way or another, probably tap into this. And the question then becomes, is this the point of it? Is this seeping into their mind and they put it on, paper, and it comes into the mass consciousness consequently as a kind of a predictive force, if you will? This is the communication happening beforehand time. And like, okay, are you aware of this now? This is going to unfold or happen. But what's your take on this, Alan? Because it's a very interesting but difficult subject to kind of ponder upon.
Sure. And then there's also, you could interpret it as, what if, in a weird sort of way, where if we are creating the universe with our minds, what if we're going to, in a weird sort of way, it's like, what do you call that? Oh God, I can't think of the term, but you're fulfilling your own prophecy. Self-fulfilling prophecy, yeah, exactly. I couldn't think of that term. So in a way, because we are in some way, maybe not the sole creators, but we certainly have a role in creating the very holographic universe we live in. We are sort of injecting our own future events into it. And there's actually people who argue, I think Freeman, I'm pretty sure it's Freeman, who has argued that this is true, that we are living in a holographic universe and that we are creating our own universe, and that is why someone, an Illuminati such and such, might put out scenes of New York being destroyed. You'll see this a lot in movies, destruction of a city or different things like that. And there's an argument that they're intentionally putting this into your consciousness so that the more people who sort of resonate with that, the more likely the event is to occur.
Right, that's right. Exactly. So they're injecting these ideas into the mass consciousness, so this will actually, potentially actually aid them in their efforts to help this, to achieve this in one way or another.
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's certainly an interesting take. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, or not necessarily completely, but I think that's an incredibly interesting take. Goro Adachi, who another amazing writer who happens to be in the Sync book, he defines, within the sync book, he defines how accurately you're predicting how accurately you're interpreting synchronicity is how accurately it predicts the future. Mm-hmm. So just as Jake's definition was how much joy you get out of it, Goro's definition is the more likely you are to predict the future, the more accurate your interpretation is. So he's very much on the bent of future prediction. I think it's probably a little of all of those things. I don't know, maybe it sounds like a cop-out, but I think I think there is evidence that we are creating our own universe, and perhaps someone could put an idea into popular consciousness, maybe the more likely it would happen. But again, as we were talking about the propagandist having unintentional synchronicity seep into his work, I think ultimately that's a losing game. I don't think some New World Order could just keep showing scenes of destruction of New York and it's just going to, sort of happen as a happenstance. I think there's something, if I could say so, it's actually even stranger than that. Which is, I guess, a pretty strange thing to say, but I think it's actually stranger than that. I do think it's something that's communicating with us. So, I want to drop in here. You read Jake's quote. I want to drop in a quote from Steve Willner, someone else I think you've had on Red Ice a few times.
That's right.
He, in his bio, he says, okay, this is Steve Willner's bio from the Sync book, or a little quote from it. Much of his research is geared towards uncovering the mysteries that are hidden in plain sight, often stating that the universe is a holographic coding system that shows undeniable signs of intelligent design, purpose, and therefore destiny, and that every single human thought is a new creation in and of itself, which is then immediately combined into the infinite collective of eternity. And I like that interpretation. Personally, I like that. It's the idea that, yes, you can put something into this informational sludge that we're living in, but it's immediately absorbed and everyone is doing it. So the thing just is sort of ever complexifying. So I don't think just some, Hollywood director could make a movie about the destruction of New York and it's going to happen. And then you have obviously areas of magic, which we can get into later, these different ideas of what magic is. And of course magic is just meant to be a more willful use of this, some of these same lines of thought. If we are creating our own universe, well then you can sort of directly influence that. So people argue, oh, this is magical spells being put out by different secret societies and things like that. But I personally think Steve's one little sentence there in his bio probably best sums up what we're experiencing.
Excellent. Why don't we just talk a little bit more about the authors that you have in the book here as we're coming towards an end of the first hour here. We want to carry on, obviously, and talk more with you. There's many more aspects that we want to talk with you about. But how many authors do you have in the book? Do you want to name them by name, or how do you want to do this, Alan?
That's hard. Yeah. So there's 26 authors. Jesus, how do we do that? Basically, different writers from across the web. Obviously, I'm in it. Goro Adachi, who many people are familiar with, has a chapter on future prediction. Jason Barrera, he writes on a blog, Cosmos Idikos. He writes under the name Elith, and he does an amazing piece on that the universe is basically a holographic construct based on the cards of the tarot, and he lays out each card as it relates to the events from 2001 to the present, showing this. That's a really good piece. We have a writer, Douglas Bolles, who does a fiction piece. We do have a few fiction pieces in here because again, you're looking for this ultimate meaning. Perfectly good with going something fiction and seeing what you can interpret from it.